Welcome to Ultimate Time Management. The goal of this course is to show you how to at least double your productivity and, more importantly, how to make measurable progress toward your goals. You see, not long ago I went to the dean of my university and told her I feel like we're getting an outdated education. I shared with her that I'm learning more from the books I get on Amazon than the classes that cost me a lot more than the $5 I paid for the books. And all she had to tell me is, we're working on it. And after that, I decided that I'm still going to stay in school because that's what everybody expects of me. But at the same time, I'm going to take my own education into my own hands. And I really went out to learn how I could beat the system so I could spend as little time in school while still getting straight A's, and then do everything I can to learn how I can go through books as quickly as possible and take what I need to apply to my life so I can learn the things I really want to learn. So in essence, I was getting two educations at the same time. I was learning from professors and I was also learning from the world's smartest people in books. And then something funny happened. When I finished school, I ended up taking over a business. And even though I went to business school, I really didn't know much about how to run the business or how to take it to the next level or anything. And every question I had, I turned to books. I wanted to learn how to increase sales, so I read some books on direct marketing and created an email community where it got to the point where I could just send out an email and generate sales. There was someone who wasn't good for the business, and it was mutual actually, so I read a book on difficult conversations and applied the formula step by step, and sure enough, she quit. And not only that, was thanking me for the opportunity. Everything from how the best businesses are managed to hiring the right people to even a couple years later when I was deciding if this is something I really want to pursue, even the answer to that came from a book. And after all this, it really hit me the difference between a formal education and how important it is to learn on your own. Henry Ford once said that an educated man is not one whose memory is trained to carry a few dates in history. He is one who can accomplish things. And the education that will help you accomplish things is only the one that you can give to yourself. It's not the one that you'll get from any formal school. But anyway, I share all this with you because I learned a lot from all that reading, but the most important thing I learned is this, that the world's smartest people, the people who have excelled in anything in life, and more importantly, made a difference in the world, the insiders, so to speak, know things that the rest of us aren't taught. And a lot of those things are actually the opposite of what everyone does. After realizing this, I realized that my purpose is to learn more and more about what those things are and to share them. So you can then, in turn, take it, apply it to your life, and live the life you want to live, and more importantly, again, make an impact on the world. And I realized that along with learning how to go through books quickly and learning how to learn, probably the other most important thing we can learn is managing our time well. Because whether we manage it well or not, it's still going to pass, and it's up to us if we make the most of it and use it to achieve greater things. And this is something that even if we go to years and years of school, it's something that we're not taught. And it's also something that most of the world doesn't do. Most of the world wastes a lot of their time. And that's why I created this course. I wanted to take the time to share with you some of the most important things I've learned as far as time management, so you can take it, apply it to your life immediately, and make measurable progress toward your goals. I've tried to break this down into a step-by-step formula where one builds on the next, and to keep it as simple as possible. We'll start with talking about your purpose and goals, and even though those aren't directly time management techniques, they're the foundation of all time management, so it's very important that you apply that and act on it. And then from there, we'll talk about rituals, what to do in the morning, how to set up your day, how to know what to work on, and so forth, so you can make the most of your time. Before we start, here's something to think about. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, wrote 2,000 years ago that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. And the short way to say that is that the person who invests his or her time well manages time well. Just like an investor wants to invest money so that it will pay a return many times the original investment, you want to invest your time in things that will pay you a return, because you're either investing your time in things that will pay in wisdom, in money, in health, in personal growth, in relationships, in good feelings, or you're wasting your time. So the goal of this course is for you to be able to use your time to move measurably closer toward your goals, because everything not moving you measurably closer is time not well invested. It's like one of my friends says, the goal is to go to bed at night and look back on your day thinking, wow, I gave it my all today. The time I spent today will pay me huge returns. Anyway, inside we're going to cover clarifying and simplifying your goals and how to organize your time to move toward them. At the end, I'm also going to ask you to take action on what you're about to learn by posting in the discussion section. Before we get started, here are a couple important things about the course. First off, I love what Mark Twain, the famous writer, said. I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. And I want you to know that I actually spent a lot of time thinking how I could get everything to you in the shortest time possible. Something that bothers me when I go through courses is all the filler and fluff just to make the course longer, and I share this with you because if there's anything I can do to get the same information to you even better, please reach out and let me know. Also, I've created a free bonus resource for you where I'll share the best ideas you can take and apply to your life from some of the most amazing books I read. My goal there is to share with you the things we should have learned in school but didn't. So to join that, just go to insiderschool.com/time. I think you're really going to get a lot out of that. Anyway, I'm so excited for you to go through this. Let's start by talking about your goals, because without knowing what you want, there's no such thing as time management. It's like the cat says in Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you want to go, it doesn't matter which path you take. Likewise, if you don't clarify and simplify your goals, it doesn't matter how you spend your time. So let's pick that up in the next video. In my course, 27 life-changing lessons from the world's smartest people, we talked about something Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest men to ever live, said. He said, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket is all wrong. I tell you, put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket." Look around you and take notice. Men who do that do not often fail. It is easy to watch and carry the one basket. It is trying to carry too many baskets that breaks the most eggs. One fault of the American businessman is a lack of concentration. What that means is you need to have a definite purpose you're going to commit yourself to and go full force with. And then you want to think about it all the time. You want to eat with it in mind, go to sleep with it, and so on. Having a definite purpose to put all your energy into is a commonality of everyone who's done something extraordinary. Just look at this, which Bruce Lee, who was influenced by Napoleon Hill, wrote just a few years before making it big. So the first thing you need to decide is, what is your definite purpose? What is the one thing you are going to devote yourself to? The thing you're going to learn to manage your time well to achieve. And once you decide what it is, you want to write it down and read it out loud with emotion, at least once a day, preferably many times a day. This is such an important concept, and I really want you to ingrain this in your mind. So I've included a free download of a rare lecture Napoleon Hill gave on purpose in the resources section of this video. I recommend putting it on your phone or iPod or whatever you use to listen to music, and listen to it within the next couple of days. You now have a definite purpose, but sometimes people ask that if they have to commit to just one thing, does that mean that they need to let go of everything else they want? And the answer is yes and no, because it's okay to have other goals as long as they help you with your major goal. But at the same time, you also want to simplify your goals. The fewer things you go after, the better job you can do at each one, which is why Andrew Carnegie said to put all your eggs in one basket in the first place. So in addition to your definite purpose, take the time now to write 2 or 3 other goals that you want. And as far as goals beyond those 2 or 3, just let them go for now. One of the most liberating things you can do is let things go. I remember, for example, a few years ago, I became really close with a 102-year-old man, and his dream was to write a book. So we decided to write the book together, but after he passed away, I decided to still go full force with it. But the problem was, I was still going full force with the other 2 goals, which, even though I didn't realize it at the time, meant I couldn't do a good job at any one of them. But when I finally decided to let 2 of them go for the time being, just to focus on one, I felt a huge weight off my shoulders and the freedom to excel at that one thing. So what are 2 or 3 other things that you want to achieve, that you want to spend time making happen? Also, let's take this one step further. What are the milestones you'll need to hit along the way for each goal that will show you that you're on your way to achieving it? How will you know you're making progress? How will you measure success along the way? So also write down the key milestones for each goal, because we're going to put it all together in a little bit and tie it to making the most of your time. So we just talked about purpose and goals, and there are 2 reasons it's important to clarify your goals. The obvious reason is so you know what you're moving towards, but the less obvious reason is mindset. You see, when it comes to being productive, you need a let's go attitude. You want an attitude that will help you make the most of every second, an attitude that will help you shoot out of bed in the morning and get going. And the key to doing this is to get so excited about what you're doing. Now, even that's probably obvious, but here's something to think about. Do the goals, and more importantly, the purpose you wrote down, have the potential to make you feel that way? Are they things that are big enough that you'll look back at the end of your life and be proud of that you spent time on them? If not, go back and change your goals, because the most important question you can ask yourself is not what do people like my boss, my family, my friends expect of me. The question is, what are your dreams? Because if you are extremely efficient and doing a great job but are going after someone else's dream or something that doesn't really excite you, you're still wasting your time. So keep these 2 things in mind. First of all, whatever you want, whatever your biggest dream is, you can start working on it now. The idea of someday is a lie. But don't take my word for it. Warren Buffett said that there comes a time when you ought to start doing what you want. Take a job that you love. You will jump out of bed in the morning. I think you are out of your mind if you keep taking jobs that you don't like because you think it will look good on your resume. Isn't that a little like saving sex up for your old age? Or this is what Seneca said 2,000 years ago in On the Shortness of Life. You are living as if destined to live forever. Your own frailty never occurs to you. You don't notice how much time has already passed, but squander it as though you had a full and overflowing supply. Though all the while that very day which you are devoting to somebody or something may be your last. You act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire. You will hear many people saying, when I am 50, I shall retire into leisure. When I am 60, I shall give up public duties. And what guarantee do you have of a longer life? Who will allow your course to proceed as you arrange it? Aren't you ashamed to keep for yourself just the remnants of your life? How late it is to begin really to live just when life must end. How stupid to forget our mortality and put off sensible plans to our 50th and 60th years, aiming to begin life from a point at which few have arrived. So before moving on, I want to make sure that you've really written down your dreams when we talked about your purpose and goals. And if you haven't, please go back and do that. I really want to make sure that when we talk about making the most of your time, you're using that time, or better said, investing that time in things that will pay you the right return. Here's the second thing to keep in mind. Like we talked about in my course, 27 Life-Changing Lessons from the World's Smartest People, it says in the Bible that whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. So whatever you have written as your goals, you won't get excited about them if you don't feel like you already have them. You want to feel like you had those things, as if you've already achieved what you want to achieve right now. This is the only way to feel that excitement about life you need to actually make the most of it. Another way to look at the same thing is to just allow your desires. For example, let's say you have this idea you want to be a millionaire. For an instant, you get excited about it, but then your mind comes in and says, wait a minute, but how are you going to do that? You're not smart enough. It's too hard. It's not possible. But what if instead of letting those thoughts come up, you went the other way with it? You decided that's what you wanted to do, and instead of resisting the desire, you just allowed it. You went with the flow of it, telling yourself how great it's going to be to get it. Whatever your goals are, you want to feel like you already have them, and you'll feel an excitement and passion to go after your goals you've never known before. You'll no longer feel like you have to push yourself to do things. You'll be pulled to do them. This is so important, by the way, that you don't want to leave it to chance. It's something you want to reinforce every day. And that's why we're now going to talk about rituals, which are your key to doing this. But also, they're the key to getting more done than you ever thought possible. So let's talk about that in the next video. But before we do, please make sure that you've written down your purpose, you've written down your goals, and make sure that they are the right goals or things that really excite you. They really are your dreams. They're not what somebody else wants from you. Have you ever committed to doing something? You had all the motivation in the world, and you get up the next day and get going with it full force. But then a few weeks later, that motivation isn't there anymore, and you're no longer making progress like you wanted to. If so, it's not your fault. We all have a limited amount of willpower. We are programmed to take the path of least resistance, and having to think about what to do next and then pushing ourselves to do it doesn't last. So we all have a limited amount of willpower. Here's how to use it. Your goal shouldn't be to use that willpower to achieve your goals. Instead, your goal should be to use that limited amount of it you have to put habits in place that will make achieving your goals inevitable. You have to focus on doing things every day over and over until they become habits, and then you no longer have to think about them. They're just automatically working to make what you want inevitable. And we'll call these habits rituals, which are certain things you decide to do at certain times and days. We'll talk about these rituals that you can create to become more productive and make measurable progress towards your goals. And when we do, here are a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, you want to keep them as simple as possible, and even try to implement as few as necessary at a time. So when you're putting your rituals together, put something together that's going to move you toward your goals, but don't go overboard and put everything that you ever want to do in there all at once, because it's going to take too much willpower to make it happen. Keep it as simple as necessary to still move you toward your goals, and at the same time, simple enough that you're going to follow through on. And second of all, when you decide on your rituals, focus on doing it or them for at least 21 days in a row to get the momentum building, preferably 30 or even more. Ultimately, what I really want to share with you is that if you want to be really productive, your day should just be a series of rituals that move you measurably closer toward your goals. The most important ritual you can put in place is your morning ritual. Because if you get up in the morning and do things that get you feeling great to make the most out of the day ahead, you'll be way more productive that day. Imagine the difference between that and your alarm just going off in the morning, snoozing 3 times, rolling out of bed, eating something quickly, and then heading out the door in a half daze. When you have a morning ritual, you get fired up and in the right mindset to go after what you want to get done that day. For this reason alone, it's a must. The time you invest by doing this first instead of jumping straight to work will pay you huge returns in productivity. But there's an even more important reason to do this. You see, Hal Elrod, who wrote the book, The Miracle Morning, which is all about setting up a morning ritual, said that we think to achieve more, we need to do more. But in reality, to achieve more, we need to become more. When you become more, you achieve more by doing less. So the even more important benefit of your morning ritual is personal development. You're investing that time not just for the day, but for your life. It's like Jim Rohn, the great speaker, said, income seldom exceeds personal development. Success is something you attract by the person you become. So you want to invest this first part of the day in things that get you in the right state of mind, and things that, if done again and again, help you become the person you can become. Here's how Hal Elrod recommends breaking your morning ritual down. He describes it by the acronym SAVERS. He says to start by some sort of silence or meditation first off to get centered, and then affirmations, followed by visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing, which is a fancy word for writing in a journal. Now, you don't have to do all of these things, but here is what I'd recommend doing as a bare minimum. Firstly, exercise. You want to invest this time in getting strong, healthy, and more importantly, feeling awake and energized for the day ahead. This can be walking out the door and going for a walk. It could be 10 minutes on a rebounder, or it could be a full workout. But even just 10 to 20 minutes first thing in the morning is enough. Next is reading your purpose out loud with enthusiasm. You've written down your purpose, and now you want to remind yourself, and not only remind yourself, but get excited about going after your vision and your purpose that day. And lastly, visualize. You want to visualize a scene where you've achieved your purpose, and you want to play that movie in your mind. But also visualize your day ahead. Visualize the day going perfectly. Visualize how you're going to be productive. Visualize how you're going to go about getting everything done and how you're going to avoid distractions. Roy Williams, who wrote the book The Wizard of Ad, said that the first step to doing something is seeing it in your mind. And whatever you want to get done for the day, see yourself doing it as part of your ritual. Now, also ask yourself, is there anything else that you want to add that will help you toward being the person you want to become? I do recommend starting as simple as possible, but if there is something else you want to add it in there as well. And then most importantly, write it down and start tomorrow morning. The most important thing I learned in college wasn't anything I learned in class, it was how I learned to study. Because while everyone else spent hours studying while checking Facebook and going on their phones, I would get in the zone. You see, in the book Flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about the psychology of optimal experience. He talks about the state of being fully engaged in what you're doing, where you feel like you lose sense of time and where the work you do feels effortless. And he calls this the flow state. Other people sometimes call it getting in the zone. But can you see how being in that state would exponentially increase your productivity? The The problem is most of us rarely experience it, and if we do, it's by accident. But assuming you are working on something that excites you, like we talked about earlier, the biggest key to getting in this state is working in chunks of uninterrupted time. That means picking one and only one thing to work on, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, which I do, or turning it off, and working for a predefined amount of time, giving it all your mental power with zero interruptions and zero multitasking. This one simple thing is the biggest game changer for productivity. Peter Drucker, who's the most famous management thinker ever, recommended working in chunks of 2 hours at a time or more, but you don't have to go to that extreme. What is important, though, is that you do work in chunks of uninterrupted time. I personally work in chunks of either 50 minutes at a time or 90 minutes at a time, but let's just keep this simple. So first of all, buy an electronic timer. You want to start working by the clock. And if you use your phone as a timer, that's not an option because that would just be a distraction. You'll check your phone, you'll see, oh, I have this text, let me respond, and so on. So you don't want to do that. Next, decide a predetermined amount of time that you're going to work in. You can do 50 minutes with 10-minute breaks. You can do 90 minutes with 20 or 30-minute breaks or something else. For now, let's just start with 45 minutes straight and with 15-minute breaks just to get started. You can then change this amount of time at any point for however long makes sense for you, but I'd rather start with less time straight since most people usually interrupt themselves about every 3 minutes when they work. And by the way, there was a study that showed it takes over 23 minutes to get back in the zone after an interruption, assuming you were in the zone in the first place. So that really goes to show how important it is to really get in the zone and stay in the zone, not interrupting yourself and not letting anybody else interrupt you as well. You really need to defend this time and cut off all possible distractions, namely email, phone, or anybody who could potentially interrupt you. So when you start working for the day, commit to working by the timer. Put 45 minutes on the timer and work for 45 minutes straight. And then when that's done, put the timer for 15 minutes and take a 15-minute break. When you work, you should work on things, by the way, that will pay you a return in your work life. But what about during your breaks? You see, most people, their idea of a break is let me go on Facebook or do something that pays no return, but you really want your breaks to be high quality. You can even go so far to say that the quality of your work is determined by the quality of your break, because unless you feel refreshed and enthusiastic, you're not going to be able to give it your all when you work. So if you invest this break time in things that make you feel refreshed, and more importantly, even maybe investing this time to again become the person you can be, like Hal Elrod talked about, you're making the best use of this time. So maybe for one of these breaks, for example, you meditate. Maybe for another, you go for a walk. We'll talk about organizing all your breaks and work time and so forth a little bit later, but the real takeaway I want you to get is this. Most people are extremely unproductive because they don't go full force with their work. And then they don't go full force with their breaks either. When they're working, they're sneaking in interruptions and breaks, and when they're taking a break, they're thinking about work. And the result is they can't think straight, they don't have the energy they need to do their best, and they don't get that much done. But by oscillating between a give it your all, get in the zone, uninterrupted chunk of time, and then a give it your all, feel completely refreshed break, you'll feel more clear, you'll get in the flow state, and if you work for even half the time that you did before, you'll get more done. Because ultimately, you see people talk about, oh, I worked 10 hours or 12 hours or all these long days, but it doesn't matter how long you work for. Hours worked isn't the measure for productivity. The real measure is how much you've gotten done regardless of how long it takes. So decide how long you want to work in, get an electronic timer, and make sure you start doing this and see what a huge difference it makes. So you're now working in chunks of uninterrupted time. The question is, what do you work on in those chunks of time? And the answer is really simple. You work on things that move you measurably closer toward your goals. These could be things that you do every day on a regular basis, or things that change based on what you're working on. But the key word there is measurably. You always need to be asking yourself, is what I'm doing right now just going to solidify the result I already have or do nothing for me? Or is it going to measurably move me closer? Is it actually going to help me get some sort of result? And I like to call this stuff 10x stuff. You want to work on 10x stuff. So stuff that will make you money or get you some sort of result. You see, Peter Drucker, the management thinker we talked about, said that business has only two functions: marketing and innovation. Everything else is a cost. And likewise, when you work, there are only 1, 2, or maybe 3 things that will give you some sort of result. If it's business, then again, those 2 things are marketing and innovation. And everything else is not an investment of your time, but a cost. So you want to stop seeing yourself as being productive for doing these things that are in reality a cost, but we fail to realize that that's what they are. So I really want you to think about right now, what are the high activity 10x things in your life and in your business? And as you continue doing this and you continue working in chunks of uninterrupted time, make sure to not get distracted by costs. Try to delegate costs as much as possible, or at least work on them at the end of the day. You want to focus your most productive time, the most important time, on 10x things. So keep that in mind and really ask yourself, what are the activities that pay me the highest returns? So the question is, what moves you measurably closer to your goals? And the only way to really answer that is by making a plan beforehand. You want to make a step-by-step plan for your major goals, and getting through that plan is what you do during your pre-scheduled time. And something else that's really important is you want to make sure that everything on that plan is really getting you measurably closer, because a lot of the time we put steps on there that don't move us in a straight line forward, but they move us just a little bit forward, but a lot to the left or the right, just tangentially, so to speak. And you really want to demand a 10x return on every step you put on your plan. And by the way, your plan could change, it could expand, but you really just want to have something to start with. And then the other thing you want to do is you want to make goals for your week, just so you have certain milestones to hit every week. The way I do this is I have a friend, we talk every week. We're very much on the same wavelength, working on similar things, and we have our little mastermind session then. And at the end of it, we share our goals for the week. So that's the time that I set my goals for the week and write it down. And the third component to really planning what you want to do are daily to-dos. So you have your overall plan, you have your goals for the week, just the milestones that you want to hit to move you closer, and also you want daily to-dos. And here's the shocker as far as your daily to-do list. Ideally, it should be only one thing. The more things it is, that means the smaller things you are working on, and the less likely any of those things are 10x things. And if you have to do a bunch of small things, that's fine. But first pick the one thing that really is going to pay you the return, and do all those smaller things at the end of the day. You see, you've probably heard of the 80-20 principle, that 80% of your results come from 20% of the things that you do. But you could even take that further and just demand, what is the one thing that I can do today that will give me the biggest return? You see, Gary Keller talks about this in his book, The One Thing, and he says to ask yourself, what's the one thing I could do such that doing it will make everything else unnecessary? Or another way you can ask yourself the same thing is, what's the one thing I could do such that doing it will give me the highest return for the time invested? That really is the question to determine what is on your quote-unquote to-do list. And while we're on the topic, there's something else I want to share with you, which is probably the most important thing I can share with you as far as time management goes. You see, the reason it seems like there isn't enough time to do everything you want to do isn't because there is so much to do. The reality is that time management could be so easy that you would have too much free time you wouldn't know what to do with. So why does it seem like there is never enough time to do the things you want to do? And ironically, the answer is laziness or avoidance of fear. It's like Robert Kiyosaki, the #1 New York Times bestselling author, said. He said that staying busy is laziness because you stay busy to avoid something you don't want to face. Or Tim Ferriss adds on to this idea by saying that instead of focusing on the 2 or 3 things we need to do that would make us productive or contribute to our goals, we invent things to do to keep us busy. So busy that there isn't enough time left for those 2 or 3 things we should do, the things you don't want to face. The solution then, according to Tim Ferriss, is to ask yourself frequently, am I inventing things to do to avoid the important? Or as Randy Pausch, the famous professor at Carnegie Mellon, said in his lecture on time management, asking yourself, do I really need to do this? You want to catch yourself avoiding the important and stop being lazy, and you'll create way more free time and get way more done. So when it comes to making a plan, when it comes to your weekly goals and your daily to-do list, I want you to keep this in mind. I really want you to think about what are the 2 or 3 things that will really contribute, that will move me in a straight line toward my goals. And also keep in mind that often these things push us out of our comfort zone. They are uncomfortable. They're things that we might fail at. And that's why we don't want to face them. But if you really want to be productive, if you really want to achieve your goals, not only in the shortest amount of time possible, but maybe ever, then you're going to have to face these things. So you really want to keep this in mind when making your plans. So really think about this and really try to organize what you work on by first having plans, having week goals, and also having daily to-dos, and ideally focusing on only 1 and if need be 2 things. Most people spend a lot of their time on other people's things, whether it's through email, answering phone calls, or just doing things that other people need from them. And they feel productive about it, but in reality, it's a lie. Let's talk about that in a second, but first, think about this, which is also from Seneca. He said that men do not let anyone seize their estates, but they allow others to encroach on their lives. Why, they themselves even invite in those who will take over their lives. You will find no one willing to share out his money. But to how many does each of us divide up his life? People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. And that brings us to what I call the other 80-20 rule. You see, you've probably heard the 80-20 rule, that 80% of your results come from 20% of the work. A lot of people talk about it these days. But the other 80-20 rule that is as important is that you want to spend at least 80% of your time on yourself, on 10x things. And then only the remainder 20% or the remainder little bit on things other people demand of you, on things that essentially don't help you move toward your goals, but maybe they have to get done anyway. There's actually a famous time management theory called the pickle jar theory, which is kind of similar. So if you imagine a pickle jar, let's say you have 4 things that need to go in that jar. Let's say you have rocks, pebbles, sand, and water. If you fill up the jar with just water, then there's no room for the other 3 things. But if you start with first the big rocks, and then the pebbles, and then the sand, and then the water, you'll be able to fit all of it in the jar. And the same thing is with your time. You want to not only spend the majority of it on yourself and on important things and on things that move you measurably closer to your goal, but you want to do it first. You do that in two ways. First of all, you want to devote at the very least the first 3 big chunks of time to yourself. You get up, you do your ritual, you have some breakfast, which could be part of your ritual, and then you go to work on yourself. You don't spend time answering emails. You don't spend time doing things that people have asked of you. You spend those first 3 chunks of time on things that move you measurably closer. And then what you can do is schedule a 4th chunk of time that is scheduled and devoted specifically to doing all those other things all at once. And when you schedule a chunk of time to do all those things, you're then chunking all these things together. You're chunking all the things you have to do together. So you're getting them done all at once and you're doing it really efficiently. Whereas if you were to spread those out throughout the day, those could have taken the entire day. So again, it's really simple, but it's extremely important. Do your ritual and schedule the first 3 chunks of time to important things, and then schedule a 4th chunk where you clump all those things together that you need to take care of, but that don't really add value to your life, that don't give you a return on your investment. Now you know everything you need to know to be way more productive. Now let's put it all together. So what I like to do is put together an Excel sheet like the one you see here to see how well I'm doing on implementing these things that we talked about, and more importantly, to encourage myself to do them. And I think that it would be really helpful for you to do the same. So let me walk you through this really quickly. It's broken down into 2 things, the morning ritual and your work ritual, the 2 things we talked about. Obviously, in each of these things, you can do whatever you want to do, whatever works best for you. This is just a template that I wanted to share with you. Like we talked about, starting with exercise or a walk, then reading your purpose, then visualization, and something else that I think would be really helpful is reading. Something we talked about in my course, Become a Learning Machine, which is all about reading at least 100 books in a year, is creating a reading ritual. And this is something that you can do by putting it in your Excel sheet as well. And then for your work rituals, you can break it down into however many minutes work best for you. Again, this is just a template, but if you wanted to do 45 minutes and a 15-minute break, and then 45, and then have a lunch break or just another 15-minute break, and so on. And then you see here, the 4th chunk of time is devoted to doing those things that don't move you measurably closer to your goal, but you have to do, maybe it's email, maybe it's errands or whatever it is, and doing it all at once. Maybe you could do 2 of those chunks of time if you really need it. Maybe you want to do more chunks of uninterrupted time, whatever works best for you. What I've done here is put all 7 days of the week. You can just do 5 days a week. You can just do 6 days a week. It's really up to you. Anyway, I've put this Excel sheet in the resources section of this video. So download it, modify it for however works best for what you want to do, and start using it. Put a check mark next to everything that you accomplish. Build the momentum. And also you'll be able to look back and see how well you're doing. By the way, I think one reason this is so powerful is it helps you build these habits. When Jerry Seinfeld had a goal that he wanted to write jokes for a full year, for 365 days a year, he printed a huge calendar, put it on his wall, and every day that he did it, he put a check mark on that day. And this is essentially what you're doing by making an Excel sheet like this as well. Now let's finish putting everything together. So this is a second Excel sheet that I recommend you use. And here's how it works. The point of it is for you to write down the measurable things that you get done every day. This is going to keep you honest, so to speak. It's going to make sure that you're actually spending your time on things that matter. Something Peter Drucker talked about in his book, The Effective Executive, is keeping track of your time and seeing how much of it is actually put to productive use. And this is kind of a twist on that. Instead of keeping track of your time, you're keeping track of how much of what you've done is moving you measurably closer to your goal. And this does a couple things. First of all, it keeps you focused on doing things that move you measurably closer. And second of all, it gives you a feedback loop that you can go back to and be like, okay, on January 1st, wow, I only got that one thing done. I thought I was so busy. Felt like I got all those things done. But in reality, this was the only thing I got done that moves me measurably closer to my goals. Let's start filling this in. Here's how it works. You've already written down your goals. So you write down your goals here on the top and the milestones for each goal that you're working on. And then here, every week, write the goals you have for the week. And then what I do here is I write the projects I'm working on within each goal. So for goal 1, I'm working on, if it corresponds, maybe it's just the same thing, but if there are different projects, you'll write the projects here. And then within each one, you write the progress that you made that day. And again, don't write things like, okay, I responded to these people's emails or I made these phone calls. What are the things, again, that move you measurably closer? So fill this in every day. And by the way, here's how I personally use this that you can do as well. Instead of 2 goals here, I have my purpose here. So let me put that in there. But I have 2 separate projects that are moving me toward that bigger goal. So I'll write project 1 and project 2, and then I'll write the milestones for each one and so forth. And lastly, what I've done is made another version of that so you can print out 4 weeks at a time. Before you start using this, just want to point one more thing out, and that is that this is built like a hierarchy. You see, you have your goals here, and then under the goals, what are the steps that you're going to need to hit along that? And then going down one step further, what are the goals this week that are going to move you toward those milestones, or at least toward that first milestone? And then you put in what are those things that are going to move you toward the week goals, that are going to move you toward the milestones, that are going to move you toward the goals. Take these 3 Excel sheets, fill in the missing pieces, print them out, and then fill them in every day as you get things done. Let these be your guide to being productive, to investing your time, and to moving measurably closer toward your goals. I hope these 2 tools are as helpful for you as they have been for me, and I hope you get a lot out of them. You've made it this far into the course. Here's what to do now. First of all, make sure you've taken action on everything we've talked about so far. To help you out with this, I've included a checklist in the resources section of this video for you to go through. Also, watch the bonus videos. There's a lot of great stuff for you in there, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it. And if you have any questions or if there's anything I can help you out with, send me an email at brandon@insiderschool.com. I would love to hear from you. And also, I've created a free bonus resource where I'll share with you the best ideas from some of the best books I read. I read about 300 books a year, and I just wanted to include this in here as an extra resource for the course because I know you'll get a lot out of it. So to join, just go to insiderschool.com/time. Also, when you do join, I'll share with you 62 life-changing books that I think you'll get a lot out of, and the cool thing is that a lot of them are free, so I'll also share with you links where you can get some of those books for free as well. And lastly, I want you to commit to taking action on what you've learned. So go ahead and write in the discussion section, what is your ritual? What is your morning ritual and what is your work ritual? And how have you put it all together on that Excel sheet? Put it right there in the discussion section so you can commit to doing it and also to share with others what you're doing as well. I'll be in there reading and commenting on every post. Anyway, I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to go through this course, and even more excited for you to take what you've learned and apply it. I can't tell you how great it feels to wake up in the morning, get started with your morning ritual, and then get in the flow state with your work, and you get so much done, but also you feel so good while doing it. And that's really my goal for you as well. When you do get started with it, feel free to send me a message and let me know how it works for you. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you in the bonus section. What I wanted to do in this section is share with you suggestions for some principles to live your life by. You see, my course on life-changing lessons from the world's smartest people is based on the idea that you want to have principles that ring so true for you, kind of a roadmap to live your life by. And the idea is based on something Ralph Waldo Emerson said. You see, he said, make your own Bible, select and collect all the words and sentences that in all your readings have been to you like the blast of a trumpet. So really what I wanted to do in this section is share with you some principles that will help with time management and being productive, but will also help with feeling fulfilled. And I suggest you take these principles, if any of them ring true for you, keep them on the top of your mind and remind yourself of them. Make them a roadmap of sorts. Remember this other quote, also by Emerson, as to methods, there may be 1,000,000 and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods ignoring principles is sure to have trouble. And the first principle that I wanted to share with you here is the idea of simplicity. Simplicity both in your internal world with your thoughts and what you're focusing on, and simplicity in your external world. Here's another quote from Confucius. He said, "Life is very simple, but we insist on making it complicated." And it really is so true. And the key to getting a lot done and the key to feeling fulfilled and living the life you want isn't doing more and more and all sorts of complicated things. It's actually getting back to the basics. It's being simple. So, like we talked about with your goals, keep them simple. With your thoughts, also, don't scatter them. Keep it simple. With your plan, don't make a 45-point plan of all these little things you have to do. Again, keep it simple. Also with your work area, don't have all these things on your desk. In fact, it's actually best to have nothing on your desk except for what you are working on. And you can even take this to all areas of your life. For example, your clothes, your closet. Keep the things only that you wear in there. When you have a clean environment and a simple environment, both internally and externally, you're more at peace, you can think better, and you achieve things a lot better. So keep that in mind and always strive toward simplicity in everything you do. One of my favorite books on time management isn't on time management. It's Seneca's On the Shortness of Life, which was written 2,000 years ago. And we've talked about it already, but I wanted to share another thing he says in there. He asks us, why are you idle? If you don't grasp time, it flees. So you must match time's swiftness with your speed in using it, and you must drink quickly as though from a rapid stream that will not always flow. He also asks, why are you so unconcerned and so sluggish while time flies so fast, extending months and years in a long sequence ahead of you? And the real question is, how many times have we wanted to do something that shouldn't have taken that long? And even if it should have taken long, we spent a lot more time doing it than it should have taken. And that brings me to the second principle I wanted to share with you, which is having a sense of urgency. See, I was at a seminar once, and the speaker, who was now a multimillionaire, used to drive forklifts at some department store. I think it was at Costco or something. And afterwards, I went up to him and asked him, how did you get from where you were to where you are now? And he said the most important thing is to have a sense of urgency. He's like, when you want something as bad as a crack addict wants his drugs, then you're not only going to get what you want, but you're going to go after it and get it quickly. So anything you want to do, whatever your goals are, whatever your purpose is, you want to go about it with a sense of urgency. Another thing that's very related is the idea of speed of implementation. You see, I've heard from many places that the successful people are the ones who, when they hear an idea or have an idea, they don't take a lot of time before implementing it. There's something they want to do, and they immediately at least go try it out to find out if it's something they should keep doing or something they should stop. What most of us do is we have an idea or something we want to do, and then we don't have a sense of urgency and we don't have speed of implementation. Instead, we talk to people about it. We spend months or years planning it to make it perfect and so forth. And all that's happening is every day we're becoming less and less likely to actually take the action that we need to take, and we're losing momentum. Successful people have a sense of urgency to get what they want, and by success, not necessarily money's worth, but whatever it means to you, whatever it is that you want to accomplish. And they also, when they have an idea, there's something they want to do, they take action immediately. To say that you just have a to-do list is oversimplifying it. In reality, you have 3 different lists. You have a to-do list, you have a doing list, and you have a done list. You see, when you first decide to do something, that's when it goes on your to-do list. And when you start doing it, it goes in the doing category. And then finally, when you finish it, it's in the done category. Now, you don't need to keep these 3 lists, but I share this with you because for most of us, the journey from to-do to done is too long. Things spend too much time in the doing category before getting into the done category. And the truth is, when things are stuck in the doing category, they're rarely giving us a measurable result toward our goals. So the challenge to you is to be aware of this and to get things from to do to done as quickly as possible. One solution I heard to this is the 50% solution. See, I once heard that when you want to write something, make finishing writing and then perfecting it 2 separate steps. And what the 50% solution is that for a lot of things, not for everything, but for a lot of things, it's better to get it done and then go back and perfect it later after you've let it get some sort of result, after you've gotten some feedback. And then when you are making it perfect, you're actually making it perfect with things that you know will make it better, not just needlessly spending time in the doing category. Let me give you an example of this in my own life. I remember 5 or 6 years ago when I wanted to make my first website, I was spending so much time on perfecting the site before putting it out there. I would play around with the colors and the font and all sorts of things to make it perfect, when in reality what I should have done is finished it all at once and then put it out there, and then refined it and made it better as necessary as things actually came up in real time. So keep the 50% solution in mind, and more importantly, spend as little time as necessary in the doing category and try to get things from to do to done as quickly as possible. The best way to get from to do to done as quickly as possible is to understand the concept of sprints. Everyone says that life is a marathon and everything we want to do is all about running the marathon, but I've come to realize that in reality, it is a long distance run, but making progress on that run is a series of sprints. I first realized this when in college. You see, in school, everyone says that the best thing to do is to keep up with the material as the semester goes on, to study a little bit every day, and you're going to do the best in the class. But I came to realize that whether you do that or not, it's fine, but the best thing to actually do is to spend a little bit of time where all you do is study for that particular test. That way, your brain gets fully immersed in that topic, and you're taking advantage of the fact that our brains work better when they're fully focused on just one thing. And when you do these sprints like I did in school, you're taking advantage of two things. The first is a deadline. Obviously in school, the deadline was the test. And if you can put deadlines for yourself of, okay, I'm going to spend 3 days full on just getting this thing done, you're taking advantage of Parkinson's law, which says that things take as long as you leave for them. If you say, okay, I have 3 months to work on this, it'll take 3 months. But if you say, okay, I have 1 month, it'll take 1 month. It was really amazing for me, for example, that in school I always seemed to finish studying and get through everything I wanted to get through by the time the test came around, regardless of how much time I devoted beforehand to studying. The other thing you're taking advantage of, which we talked about, is a multiplying brain power when your brain is focused on just one thing for a long or a longer period of time. So when you make your plans and have different tasks for different projects maybe, or unrelated projects that are going on at the same time, just pick one, make it small enough where it could be a sprint of either 3 days a week or whatever, and then make that your obsession and focus and work on just that one thing to get it done, to get it as quickly as possible from to do to done. Now, this isn't the best thing to do for everything, but everyone talks about running the marathon. Nobody talks about running the sprint, and I think running the sprint is way more powerful. You get things done a lot more quickly, and the result of the work is actually better than worse. So keep this in mind, and whenever applicable, create sprints for yourself to run. Focus on one thing and see it to completion, and do it in a short period of time, whatever it means for that particular project, with a deadline and with all-consuming attention. And by the way, this is kind of the same thing as the flow state we talked about earlier. Remember, we talked about working on one thing at a time for 45 minutes or 50 minutes or 90 minutes or whatever you chose to do at a time. What you do when you run sprints with projects or tasks is you get in that same state, but you're doing it for a long period of time. And then after that, what you should do is, let's say you get a big project done, then just like you did with your shorter work periods, take a break to completely rejuvenate, to take your mind off of that so that when you return, you're ready for the next sprint to go again full force. In this section, we've talked a lot about getting things done and making progress quickly. We've talked about speed of implementation, getting from to-do to done as quickly as possible in sprints. There's one last thing I want to share with you though, and it's this. Anytime you have a new goal or something new that you want to go after, your number one job isn't to plan or figure things out. Your number one job is to get some sort of progress as soon as possible. That should be your first step. If you want to go to the gym, for example, let's say your goal is to gain some weight or lose some weight, whatever it is. Your number one job is to do whatever it takes to make some sort of measurable progress that you can see as quickly as possible. Get your first taste of success as soon as you can. And the reason for this is because progress breeds motivation. You can plan all you want, and you should plan at some point, but until you get some sort of progress, until you see some sort of result that, okay, what I'm doing is working, you're not going to be as motivated as you could be. The best way to get motivated is to make some progress. And the cool thing is, once you do make progress, you've gotten the ball rolling. And at that point, your only job is to keep the momentum going, to not let it stop, which as long as you're focused on isn't too hard. So whatever goal you have, whatever you want to do whatever it takes to taste a little bit of success as quickly as possible. Let's talk about making your to-do list. Here's what I recommend you do. I recommend taking a piece of paper and folding it 3 times. Then about 2/3 from the left of this small piece of paper now, draw a line going straight down. And here's what you're going to do on the left side of that line. Write down the big things you're going to do that day, the measurable things that are going to move you measurably closer toward your goals. And then on the right side, write down the things that you have to do that won't move you measurably closer. So the left side are the things that you're going to spend the first 3 chunks of uninterrupted time working on, and the right side are all those things you're going to do all at once by knocking them out at the same time during a separate chunk of uninterrupted time. This has been the best way I found to do a to-do list. That way I can carry it around with me everywhere it fits in my pocket. And more importantly, I have clearly divided what are the things that are valuable to me, that are moving me closer to what it is that I want, and what are the things that I have to do. Maybe it's call a certain person, maybe it's send an email, maybe it's make an appointment for something. Those are all things that go on the right. And again, remember, on the left side, the things that really matter, keep it preferably to only one big thing. And maybe 2, and definitely no more than 3, but ideally 1 to 2. This is really important. You want to make your to-do list the night before. And there's 2 reasons for this, because first of all, then when you start your day, you don't have to start by planning, you can start by doing. Another important reason is you can go to bed with an idea of what you want to do the next day and keep that on your mind. Thomas Edison's wife once said that her husband would keep in mind all the problems that he wanted to solve the next day. He would let it saturate his mind as he went to sleep, and often the next day when he did go after those problems or things that he wanted to do, he would do it with success. And lastly, after you've made your to-do list, avoid the temptation to keep unnecessarily adding things to it. Remember, anything that is to go on your to-do list, ask yourself this question: do I really need to do this? And if so, do I really need to do this today? A lot of what I learned about managing time came when I was learning to beat the college system and get good grades. And one of those things was realizing what the biggest time management obstacle is. I noticed I'd be studying and then all of a sudden a thought would come into my mind of something I need to do or something I need to check online. And then I would stop without thinking what I was doing and go do that other thing until I would realize, okay, I'm doing something else. Let me get back to studying. So the biggest time management obstacle is impulse decision making. In the last video, we talked about how when you're making your to-do list, you don't want to add things to it unnecessarily. Once you've made it, try to stick to it. But a lot of times, we won't write things on our to-do list. Just things will come in our mind and we'll stop what we're doing and go do that other thing. So it's really important that you make it a rule to avoid impulse decision making. A lot of times these things that we say we have to do are just excuses for us to interrupt ourselves. If you really do have to do that thing, then still don't interrupt yourself. Just write it down on a piece of paper and come back to do it after you're done with your uninterrupted work time. Avoid impulse decisions at all costs. Just like it's not good to buy things on impulse, it's also not good to make decisions or manage your time based on impulses either. Something really important to consider is always being hydrated and not feeling hungry, because those things are big obstacles to getting a lot done, to feeling clear and working well. So you want to eliminate these potential roadblocks. And here's how you do that. First of all, you always want to have a large bottle of water on your desk while you're working. To make it even better, you can upgrade your water by adding a little bit of lemon juice in there. It will keep you hydrated and it will keep you awake. It's really great. What I do actually as part of my ritual is when I'm having breakfast, I'll also, first of all, fill 3 large water bottles and I'll take them with me. So I always have a water bottle on my desk and I'll just sip while I'm working. It's a really great thing that I've come across and I really recommend it. Also for food, this may or may not be a problem. If it isn't, just leave what you're doing alone and just keep doing it. That's fine. But another thing that could be helpful is making it part of your ritual in the morning when you're having breakfast to just prepare all your foods or as many of your foods as you want for the rest of the day all at once and take it with you. That way you don't have to interrupt yourself over and over to go eat. So that's something else that you may or may not want to experiment with. But at the very least, make sure you always have a water bottle on your desk. There are two things we talked about earlier that I really want to bring together and share with you how important they are. The first was getting in the flow with your work time, working in chunks of uninterrupted time and taking uninterrupted breaks to get in the flow state. And then the second thing we talked about was getting into flow for longer periods of time when we talked about sprints and marathons. I shared with you in college, for example, how I would get in the zone for 2 or 3 days at a time by obsessing over the test and really cranking out whatever I had to do. And then obviously when the test is over, there's rest time. So balancing between maybe a full-on sprint with your work and then scheduling specific days just for rest as well. And what I wanted to share with you here is what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi says or kind of makes as a challenge in the last chapter of his book. You see, he talks about the flow state and how athletes and different people can really get fully immersed in what they do, where they lose a sense of time and they produce their best work. But the challenge at the end is, can you make your life into a flow state? Can your entire life be lived in the flow state, or at least a large part of it? And that's something I wanted to share with you here to think about, because living in that state is a state of optimal experience, a state where you're really squeezing everything out of life. And I think that's really the most important thing you can do. So here's what he says. An important part of getting in the flow state normally, let's say you have a big project you're working on and you have a goal for that project, you have a challenge, and only once you've established that can you really get in the flow state to work towards that challenge or goal. Likewise, the key to making your life more and more of a flow state is having a bigger goal for your life, having a definite purpose like we talked about earlier. And then once you have that, I think what's really important is working hard and playing hard. Few people do either. They don't go full out efforts with their work and full out efforts with their play where they rest and rejuvenate as well. Henry Ford said in his book, My Life and Work, that every man who works ought to have sufficient leisure. The man who works hard should have his easy chair, his comfortable fireside, his pleasant surroundings. These are his by right. But no one deserves ease until after his work is done. And what that really reminds us of is go full on out with your work. Go hard. Get really immersed in it. Let everything else, all distractions, fall away, both when you're working in chunks of uninterrupted time and when you're working in larger periods of sprints, which are a few days or a week at a time or whatever it is. Work hard and play hard and have it all fit in to that larger, major purpose that you've set, and you'll feel a fulfillment and an optimal state of experience, as Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about in Flow, that perhaps you've never known before. So I just wanted to share that with you here to really bring it all together and just something else to think about and maybe work towards. In the last video, I shared with you the idea of getting your life into a flow state and how that stems from having a definite major purpose and devoting your life to achieving that purpose. And it's easy to see how your work periods should be devoted to making that purpose happen. But something else that's probably not as obvious is you also want to make your rest periods contribute to your purpose as well. Because when we talk about rest and rejuvenation, it's really important to not confuse rest with idleness, because they're not the same thing. Idleness and just sitting still and doing nothing isn't necessarily rest. Henry Ford actually went so far to say that there's nothing so despicable as idleness. Instead, you really want to think about, what are the things that make you feel rejuvenated? What are the things that when you do, you feel completely at peace and like you can go back to your work full force? Remember earlier we talked about asking yourself, what are the high activity things that you do for your work that move you measurably closer toward your goals? And it's equally important to ask yourself, for your rest, what are the things that allow you, that when you're done with them, to go full force with your work? But there's one step further you can take this, and that's use your rest time to still contribute to your purpose. Doesn't mean you're working, it just means you're doing something different. For example, your rest could be reading, it could be exercise, it could be stretching, it could be meditating. Things that make you a better person and make you more likely to achieve your goals or move you closer to your goals. Now, you don't always have to do this, but I think something really important in life is living just a little bit beyond your edge. You do this with your work by going full force, getting in the zone, making measurable progress. And while it's still good to sometimes sleep and relax and rest, I think it's also helpful to remember that's what everyone does, but you can go one step further by still doing things that clear your mind and make you feel refreshed, but at the same time push you a little bit beyond your edge and move you closer toward your goals. The wisdom of Andrew Carnegie is told to Napoleon Hill. Andrew Carnegie, who at his peak had a net worth of, in today's money, $310 billion, told Napoleon Hill that no man can become great in any field without the aid of the mastermind principle. He says that no mind is complete, and richness of the mind comes from the harmonious alliance of two or more minds working together toward the achievement of some definite purpose. Since this course is really about making measurable progress toward your goals, it's really important that you don't go about doing it alone. Something that I've done to take advantage of this principle that you may want to do as well is I have a friend who is very much in alignment with what I'm doing, and every Thursday we talk for about an hour. I share my progress, he shares his progress, and we brainstorm. And it's been one of the most beneficial things I've done. So that's maybe something you want to do. And what a lot of other people do is they have a group of people that get together every week, whether it's in person or virtually, and do the same thing. When you do this, you're taking advantage of not only your own experiences, but other people's experiences as well. So it's really an exponential effect. So make sure you take advantage of the mastermind principle. At the very least, think of someone who is very much in alignment with you and set up a 1-hour weekly call. One of the most amazing experiences I've had is over a 4-year period becoming really close with a man who was 102 years old. He really was an inspiration to me. He was always so energetic and living life to the fullest. And even when he turned 99, he just got a girlfriend. But something he always used to say is that doubt is the beginning of wisdom. And I remember I was once feeling cloudy and a little overwhelmed. And from that doubt, from that feeling, I made a commitment to myself that sparing things that I actually need to do, I'm only going to go on the internet once a day. And what that means is I'll only check my email once a day. If there's anything else that I want to check online that I don't actually have to do, I'll also do that one time a day at the same time. And I won't just randomly go on my phone and check things online. And this means of simplicity has really brought me a lot of peace because I'm not always trying to distract myself anymore, like had become somewhat of a habit when I was just checking the internet at any time. Also, it's been a huge time management boost because, again, it's eliminating that distraction. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's not something that you have to do, but why don't you try it out for a week? See if you can just go online one time a day. If there are other things that you need to do online as part of your work, do that, but don't do other things online. Don't go read articles or go on Facebook or needlessly check your email. And the best time to do this is during your fourth work period or after you've devoted your first work periods to uninterrupted work. I just wanted to share that with you if you want to try it out. And even if you don't want to try it out, at the very least, unless absolutely necessary, make it a rule to not check your email until 12 o'clock. Anyway, I hope you give it a try and let me know how it goes for you. Something I really like that Warren Buffett said is that saving to do what you really want to do for later is like saving sex for old age. It makes no sense. So my second challenge to you is to ask you what's something that you've always wanted to do but you're pushing off. For example, for me, I wanted to take a trip to Spain, and every time the summer would come around or a good time supposedly to do it, I would make some excuse or have some reason why I couldn't do it. So what I did is I took advantage of a principle. You see, our brains work very differently when they think of why to do something and how to do something. So if you commit to doing something tomorrow, your brain is going to be thinking, okay, how do I do it? Instead of why do I want to do it? But if you commit 6-7 months from now, then you're going to be thinking of the why. That's why, by the way, it's a lot easier to ask someone, let's say you need to move. It's a lot easier to say, can you help me move in 6 weeks than can you help me move tomorrow? Because in 6 weeks, that person is going to appeal to the why. Yeah, I'm a nice person. I want to help out. But if you say tomorrow, they're going to be thinking, okay, I have that appointment and this and that, so maybe I can't do it. So anyway, with this trip to Spain, what I did is I booked it 10 months in advance. I just bought the plane ticket, and that way there was no excuse that I could make. So again, what is something that you really want to do and commit to doing it? Make it happen. And then if you want, even go ahead and post in the discussion section what it is that you've committed to doing. I'd love to hear what it is that you're going to do. And lastly, remember what Seneca said. Most people push off what they really want to do. They tell themselves, yeah, I'll do it later. But it's a lie, and it's just an illusion. We have no guarantee there's even going to be a later. Don't live on the deferred life plan. Make it happen, and make it happen now, or at least commit to doing it. There's a saying that I really like that says that formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. And the truth is that having the ability to go through books quickly is like having a superpower to get anything you want in life. So what I wanted to do in this section is a couple things. First of all, I've created my courses as a curriculum. And as a student of this time management course, I also wanted you to have access to my course, Become a Learning Machine, How to Read 300 Books this year, because I think you'll get a lot out of it. So what I've done is I've created a link for you where as a student of this course, you can get it for only $10. And the only reason I'm charging anything for it is it's a 3-hour course. And I know if I just included it as a bonus to this course, you probably wouldn't go through it. So to join the course, you can either click on the link in the resources section of this video or use the coupon code TIME MANAGEMENT. But either way, I want you to get as much out of your reading as possible. So I've included a few of the lectures I think you'll really like as a bonus right here as well. Before we really get into specifics, I just want to sell you in this video on why you need to become a learning machine. When I was in college, I was getting 2 educations at the same time. The first was taught by professors. The second was taught by Richard Branson, Warren Buffett, and some of the world's smartest thinkers. That's when I realized how amazing books really are. We take them for granted because in school we read so many books that we're just assigned to. But when you really think about it, it's so amazing that you can learn directly from some of the world's smartest people. But don't take my word for it. Elon Musk, the co-founder of PayPal, co-founder of Tesla, and founder of SpaceX, 3 different billion-dollar companies, said he learned to be a rocket scientist not by getting a master's degree, but by reading and talking to people. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner and a billionaire himself, said, "I have known no wise people who didn't read all the time." Napoleon Hill, whose book on success has sold over 70 million copies, said, "The person who stops studying merely because he has finished school is forever hopelessly doomed to mediocrity, no matter what may be his calling. The way of success is the continuous pursuit of knowledge." Will Smith said the keys to life are running and reading. Reading because there's no problem that you can ever face that someone hasn't already faced, mastered it, and written about it. In the end, most successful people have their love of reading in common. It's no wonder Donald Trump reads 3 hours a day, Warren Buffett 8 hours a day, and Bill Gates spends an entire week at a time just reading. If you want to do big things, reading isn't just a nicety, it's a must.
Reading. The reason that reading is so important. There have been millions and billions and billions and gazillions of people that have lived before all of us. There's no new problem you could have with your parents, with school, with a bully, with anything. There's no problem you can have that someone hasn't already solved and wrote about it in a book. So the keys to life are running and reading.
Welcome to part 2. In this section, my goal is to change how you look at reading. Because when you look at reading differently, you automatically read differently. In this video, I want to share with you what you're learning for. In college, they teach you things so you can have an intelligent conversation about it. They give you a lot of information that you can't really act on. But what we're talking about here, and what I want you to do, is read for action. You want to read only for actionable takeaways. That's what books need to be. They need to be tools to guide you to the correct action. That's why you need to always be thinking when you're reading something, how can I apply this? And if it's something you can't apply, then it's just entertainment. This entire course is based on the idea that a single idea, if thoroughly applied, can revolutionize your life, while 100 average ideas or theories just confuse you. The whole point of this is to be able to go through books, to extract ideas and things you can apply to your life, and get the goals that you want and live your dream life. A few days ago, for example, I was reading a book and I was about halfway through. I hadn't gotten a single idea while reading it, but I decided I wasn't going to stop. I was just going to go through it. It's funny because about 3/4 of the way through, I got an idea, just something he flat out said in the book, that I knew that if I took that and implemented it, it would be worth probably $10,000 to me in something I could implement very quickly. And that's the point. Because I spent the time to read that book, and I got one idea out of the entire thing. Most people, if they're just reading to have a conversation about it, or just reading like we learn it in school, it would have been a waste of time. But if you get one idea from the book that you can apply to make your life better, then it's worth the time. And that's what you need to do with reading. Remember, you're not reading to have a conversation about it like they teach you to do in school. You're reading for action. So I hope you take that away from this course, because this is a complete mindset shift from what we're taught to learn and how we're taught to learn. The point of learning is to take away actionable things we can apply to make our lives better. Remember this, as the great business philosopher Jim Rohn said, "Don't let your learning lead to knowledge. You'll become a fool. Let your learning lead to action. You'll become wealthy. Let's talk about how to instantly double your reading speed. You see, it's funny because like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even more than that, before I was really into reading, I, for whatever reason, read a book called Power Reading. And just like I recommend that you do, although I wasn't trying to do this, to this day there was one big takeaway that I had from the book that I have applied ever since, and it's literally instantly doubled my reading speed and the reading speed of everyone I've shared it with. And here is the trick. It sounds simple, but try it out and you'll see it'll work, and I'll explain to you why it works as well. So the trick is to, every time you read, have a pen in your hand and use that pen to read your eyes along by kind of, you're not writing, but you're just using it to lead your eyes underneath each line. And here's why it works. The reason it works is because if you don't use a pen, the way your eyes work is it takes a snapshot of 3 or 4 words at a time before moving on to the next 3 or 4 words. But when you're using a pen, you're making your eyes work in a continuous motion. So it's kind of like the difference between looking at different pictures or watching a movie. Obviously, you can watch a movie more quickly than you can go through a series of pictures. So that's the trick that you should use immediately. But here are 2 benefits of using this as well. First of all, like we talked about, you want to make your book a tool and you want to write all over it, write notes, underline things so you can come back to it. You want to take notes in it, which we'll talk about in the next 2 videos, and so forth. So that's one benefit. And another benefit is that it makes your reading an active process. See, we talked about before how the biggest mistake you can make is lying down and just making reading a very leisurely thing. Sure, there's a time for leisurely reading, but if you're trying to get through a lot of books, it's not the way to do it. You want to make it an active process. So when you're using a pen, you're kind of in the zone, kind of the let's go, let's make this happen zone. And that's what you really need to really make your reading faster. So always have a pen in hand and use it to lead your eyes along. And one question sometimes people ask me is, what about reading on a computer? Well, first of all, you can use your mouse to kind of have the same effect as a pen. It doesn't work as well, but it still works. But another thing I want to share with you is, personally, I'd always, if it's something really important and not just pleasure reading or, a distraction, I like to print it out. For example, there was a book called Scientific Advertising. I think it was written in the 1920s by Claude Hopkins, which is a really great book. And what I did is I had the book, I went to the school copy area or whatever, and I had them print it out for me and bind it so I could read it in paper. I think it's always better to read in paper in front of you, but either way, you always want to have something leading your eyes along, and that'll instantly increase your reading speed significantly.